Morning, everyone. There's a lot of flies in here today.
Yes. They're all on me, I thought.
They're all on me too. I was just feeling them crawling around, thinking as long as you don't go up my nostrils or in my ears, I can probably tolerate it. And they get very close, and then, oh, phew, they would move. I was wondering, what are they doing? Like, is it the warmth? Is it the salt? Is it the bits of dead skin? Is it just a novel experience?
Arjun Brahman tells a story about he had fly, and he reckoned it was a Buddhist fly because it was was the word
Circumambulating?
Yeah, around the mouth.
Yeah. Helping us be aware of our face. I wanted to share two different meditation practices that complement each other. Generally, I think in Zen, we don't give a lot of instruction around methods with Zazen. We tend to just instruct people, particularly in the Soto tradition, to just sort of sit, be aware of the breath, and be aware of your mind. But sometimes I think it can be helpful to try out particular meditation practices and just see how they feel, and sometimes feel inspired to spend time with them. So one of them is inspired by the Yogacara mind-only school of Buddhism that has been very instructive to me in my practice. So this is just a meditation that kind of came together through some classes I took with my teacher Kokyo. And then I'd like to describe the Tibetan practice of Tonglen, which is the giving and receiving compassion practice. And the two go together because this first practice creates a kind of spacious, cool energy, a feeling of being very open and cool and at ease. And that kind of energy is very beneficial when you're working with compassion, because with compassion you can burn out quite easily. It's very warm. It's often very particular and granular. And so having this expansive practice and a compassion practice together makes it sustainable for our whole lives. So this practice, inspired by the mind-only Yogacara school, has 4 parts, and you can do it all 4 parts in one period of Zazen, or you can focus on one for a period of Zazen and another period of Zazen, focus on another, or you can even quite quickly move through all 4 of them. Sometimes I do it just in a set of breaths, in two breaths, one inhalation, one exhalation, one inhalation, one exhalation. You can do this in just over 2 breaths. But initially it's good to do it, I think, maybe over a period of Zazen, spending 5 or so minutes with each of these 4. So the first part is being aware when you're breathing, just of your own existence in this particular spot. So you're breathing in and breathing out, and you're aware of your existence. You're aware of your lungs, the edges of your body, your general way that you're sitting like a Buddha, just aware of your own existence. You can spend some time just being aware of your own existence, breathing in and breathing out. So it's very grounding. Here I am, in this moment, in this place. And then when that's feeling settled, which It might only take 3 or 4 breaths, but it might take 5 or 10 minutes. If you're very distracted, it might be really hard to kind of settle into, I'm just here right now. This is all I'm doing, just sitting here. It might take a while. So that's the first. Then the second is, while breathing, to feel one's existence in a much wider space and over an infinite amount of time. So rather than seeing ourselves just in this one particular place, in this one particular moment, we're expanding that out to see ourselves on this continent, on this planet, in this galaxy, and so on, in not just this moment in time, but in this web of time where we can't actually find any beginning or starting point to any moment. So we're just in this vast space and time with no boundary. And it's often, I think, practical to think of it more in terms of just the earth. We don't have to get too big. We can just think of it in the earth, or whatever country you're in, whatever town you're in. And over the centuries, maybe from the time of Buddha to now, or the Buddha until a few centuries forward, just an expansive sense of time and space. So that's the second one, practice. So first it's just here I am, here and now, and here I am in this limitless time and space, in which we can start to not feel quite so solid. We're just part of something vast. So they're the first two. And then the third is to bring our attention to the fact that we're aware. So it's just becoming aware of the fact that we're aware. So we're becoming aware of awareness itself. We're just noticing awareness itself. And if you want to spend some time with this, you might explore a little bit, where is that awareness residing? How do I know I'm aware? Like, am I aware? Yes. Everybody answers yes. How do I know I'm aware? And you can explore that for quite a while. It's quite subtle. How do I know I'm aware? And you have this sort of sense, well, I can see myself being aware. How can you see yourself being aware? I know I can sort of see myself seeing myself being aware. Oh, really? How can you see yourself seeing yourself being aware? Well, and it just goes on. And that then opens us to the fourth, which is to consider the possibility that awareness has no location or no boundary. So like in the first, we're being aware of ourselves here. In the second, we're being aware of the wider time and space, being limitless. Then again, we're becoming aware of our own awareness. And then we're opening up to this vast, boundless awareness. We cannot find out the spot that it begins. We can't locate in ourselves where our awareness begins. And a simple little sort of thought experiment that you can do is to try and see if you can catch when the beginning of a thought happens, and we never can. A thought happens and then we're aware that the thought is there. We can't begin the thought. We can't say, I'm going to think this thought now. We just can't. The thought's there and we become aware of it. So that's just a little thing to experiment with. So that's the first practice. The effect of this practice, I am here. I am part of infinite space and time. I'm aware. There's no boundary to awareness. That practice creates a very open, cool quality. And I want to share something that happened the other day. I was sitting with my son outside, which we're now calling the mud brick house. We're just calling it a house now. Sitting outside the mud brick house, and we were working on part of the doorway, putting trim around the door. And we saw a little beetle that was like a little bit like a leopard maybe. It was black with a creamy but fluorescent bright green. So it was bright and fluorescent but slightly creamy. So it was kind of very interesting green. Very, really very noticeable, distinguishable against everything else. And out the front of the place, because it's where construction has happened, there's no grass or anything, there's just clay and bits of gravel and like nothing of any nutrition. And so we were watching this beetle and wondering, what is it doing? And it seemed to be very distinctively finding its way over the lumps and bumps. We just watched it. My son commented, "This is more interesting than television." Yeah, it is more interesting than television. And then it got to the edge of the mud brick wall, and it just started going straight up the mud brick wall. And it's a little beetle, and the mud bricks are textured, so it was actually going in sort of overhang. It was having to lean out and get over lumps. And we were both surprised that it could do that, first of all. We were also surprised at how determined it seemed to be going vertically up what felt like it wasn't going to get you anywhere. I was feeling a bit stressed, like, you're putting in all this effort. There's no food up there. It's just a mud brick wall. You're going to get to the top and it's a mud brick top. So I was sort of feeling like you're wasting your energy. Why are you doing this? And every now and then it would turn and look downward. Both my son and I go like, oh good, it's going to give up on this journey and go back down. But then we'd go up again. And it got to about 2 meters up. And then my son had the thought, maybe it's getting altitude. Maybe it's getting elevation. I thought, oh yeah, maybe it's getting elevation and it's going to fly. And just a little bit after that, it turned down and then it just flew off. And within 2 seconds, it had gone right across the valley, over the river and into the forest. Like 2 seconds it was gone. This little beetle flew so fast. And it was such an interesting contrast, because for us, while it was going across the ground, we could have gone way faster than it. Like what took it 5 minutes was just one step for us. We couldn't climb the mud brick wall, but we could just get a ladder and be up the top of it very quickly. But then when it flew, it would have taken me many minutes to get to that spot in the forest that it went to. Get down to the river, cross the log, which Francis knows the log, to cross to get to the other side and climb up the embankment and get into the forest. And as we just watched that whole thing, this teaching came to me that my son and I were aware of each other, being aware of the beetle. The beetle may have had some awareness of us. I mean, it obviously had quite a clear plan. It was going across this ground and going up this wall. It seemed quite obvious to us eventually that its purpose for the whole thing was so that it could make it over to the other side, into the forest. So it had definitely had intention, and it may have been aware of us in whatever way it was aware. And it was this lovely feeling of how when you have life, you have awareness. When you have life, you have consciousness. And it doesn't seem to make sense to try and say there's some boundary, like my awareness is just here in my head and yours is just there in your head and the beetle's is just there in his or her head. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like we're sharing this pool of awareness together. So that's what this first teaching does. You could call it a meditation on awareness. Breathing in, I'm here. Breathing out, I'm part of this whole world. Breathing in, I'm aware. Breathing out, I'm in this whole world of awareness. Boundless awareness. So I'd really recommend that you spend some time with that in whatever way you'd like to, just explore it. And so it goes very nicely with this the Tonglen practice, which is, it's actually receiving and giving, but in English it sounds better to say giving and receiving. So we say giving and receiving, but the practice is receiving and giving. So in the practice you're receiving visually, like you're imagining in your mind, receiving the suffering of the world, and breathing out peace and equanimity and happiness and safety and all those sorts of things. You're breathing that out. You're breathing in the pain, breathing out peace and painlessness. And the way to work with it is often to start with just a sort of more abstract, maybe you could say, breathing in sort of dark and heavy and rough energy, and breathing out warm and light and smoothness. You can think of it that way initially. And then when you've settled with that a little bit, whatever feels the easiest first. So sometimes it's easier to think of some way in which you're suffering, we're suffering. Sometimes it's easiest to think in the way someone that you really love is suffering. Whichever one is easier for you. And good to start with something not too difficult, something a little light, a light kind of suffering. So you might breathe in. I'm a little bit insecure, let's say. I notice that about myself. So you breathe in the feelings of insecurity or worrying about what people think of me, whatever it might be. Feeling a bit foolish, feeling a bit guilty, whatever it is, breathing it in and breathing out. Peace, stability, safety, whatever's relevant to whatever you've breathed in. If you're breathing in, feeling I'm not good enough, you breathe out, you're a perfect Buddha. Whichever way you want to do it. So start off with yourself or someone you love. But maybe not start off with something really difficult, but maybe just something a little bit light. Someone you love who's having a little bit of trouble with something. Like, let me breathe in the weight of that for you. Let me take that in for myself. Let me take it from you. Take that burden from you. And breathe out a good resolution. May it all work out for you. Whichever words work. Just saying in your mind. So you're breathing it in and then breathing out. And then you can move, you can just stay in on yourself or with someone that you care about. And then you can practice it with people that you're a little bit more neutral, that you don't particularly know. But we all know everyone has troubles. So you could breathe in the person at the checkout at the supermarket, the next door neighbour, a co-worker, someone in traffic in the car in front of you. Breathe in whatever difficulties you're having, and breathing them in, transforming them, and breathing out peace. So you can do this spontaneously any time, you know. There's moments all the time when you could just do this as just a couple of breaths, this practice. And then as you get more used to it, you can start applying it to more difficult situations, either a really difficult situation of your own that you don't like looking at, you can start to look at it a little bit, or someone that you have a lot of difficulty with and you tend to find yourself having mean-spirited thoughts towards them or judgmental thoughts towards them, you can practice seeing if you can be more open-hearted. All the difficulties that you have cause you to be the sort of person that you are. Breathe it all in and breathe out. Peace and happiness for you, safety for you, friendship for you, freedom for you, lack of anger for you, whatever would be relevant. And you can just do this practice. People do it all through their lives. And what's so lovely about it is after a while, you just start doing it without it being so formal. You don't have to think like, oh, I'm going to do a giving and receiving practice. You don't need to think of it that way anymore. You just find yourself going, oh, I hope they'll be okay. I don't want them to be suffering. You know, just start to think about it that way. And after a while, it really becomes quite difficult to even think mean-spirited thoughts. It just doesn't seem to satisfy anymore. It feels awkward. Doesn't feel in accord with reality. So these two practices together are very good, because if you just do the second practice, the Tonglen practice, if you're not careful, it can start to feel too weighty. You can get too caught in all the details. So having a very open, expansive practice, a sense of the infinite, boundless universe, and no one existing independently in it, all of us being just part of a fabric, it makes it much more possible to take in suffering without getting overwhelmed by it. You can just breathe it in and have lots of space, like you're breathing in, and you yourself are the whole universe, so you can breathe it in. There's room. There's room to think about how unfair it all is, or how badly it's all going. There can be a sense that things are going really badly, that the world is completely going crazy.
Like now.
Yeah. I was just reading Daniel Berrigan in the 70s talking about how the whole world is turning, and it was during the Vietnam War. He was talking about how terrible it was and how we've entered a very dark period. So it's good to have an expansive sense of, no matter how dark this period is right now, I can still breathe in all of that and breathe out the wish for all beings to care about each other, for no one to be lonely, for no one to suffer, for no one to be in fear of their lives. We can still do that practice. You don't really need to think about, does it work? It's not really the point. It does work in some mysterious ways. If no other way, it works in that it gives us this great, gives us courage. Like, this practice requires discipline. It takes effort, it takes discipline, it takes intention, it takes a selflessness for us to do this practice. And when we cultivate those qualities in ourselves, we're a much stronger, more capable person. We can be of more benefit in the world. So this practice makes us someone who, in a crisis, will rise to the occasion. In a difficulty, will rise to the occasion. Yeah. So there are two practices you can take on, see how they feel for you. Would anyone like to comment? What we're going to do is, I've got this microphone, but I didn't find the courage to try it out. So just today we'll do what we did last week, which was hand the laptop around if you'd like to say something, so that Margaret will be able to hear. Would anyone like to ask a question or make a comment? Tony.
It's a simple question. Sorry. It's a simple question. What was the fourth step of the 4-step process?
Okay.
Oh no! I pressed it wrong.
Did you do something? Oh, just
Yep.
hand it back to me. I can probably just make it come. That's it. Yeah, you've got to knock that little bit.
Yes.
There we go. It's back. Yeah, you just touched it by accident and made it come
Yeah.
back.
Oh, amazing. Okay, right, here we are. Yeah. So what was the 4th step of the 4-step process, sorry?
Okay, well, you have to hand me back the laptop.
Oh, right!
Just got to do musical laptops. But we'll have the microphone.
We need the suggestion from this morning that you, rather than the rackets in the Zen, that you wear your computer in the Zen.
Yeah. So the fourth one, the third one is just being aware of awareness itself. So you're just noticing that you are aware. And I like to do the practice of thinking, I feel like the awareness is behind my eyes, in my head a bit behind my eyes, and then saying to myself, how do I know that? Well, I can kind of get behind that and see that. And how do you know that? Well, I can kind of get behind that and see that. And that begins taking you into the fourth, which is just to consider the possibility of boundless awareness. Not as if it's like a substance moving through the air, that's far too much, but just as if awareness is, wherever there's life, there's awareness. And so I was actually thinking about that koan that's not in our curriculum, and I don't think it's actually a true koan. It might be. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Well, if there's a tree in the forest, there's a whole lot of life in the forest. So, of course, it's heard. Wherever there's life, there's consciousness. And I was talking about that particular koan with someone, and they said, "Isn't that interesting that in a lot of religious traditions, you have this idea of God as all-seeing and all-knowing?" And it suddenly occurred to me that sense of God sees and knows everything is our equivalent of boundless awareness. We have this sense that there's this boundless awareness. All you have to do is give your attention to it, and you're part of this extraordinary thing, which is awareness. And you can personify that, if you like, and call it God. God sees you, God sees everything, God sees the suffering. And people find that comforting. They sometimes find it scary, but they do also find it comforting. So we can find it, we don't need to worry about the scary, but we can find it comforting, that there's just this boundless awareness, and we're part of it. With all the insects and the birds and the fish and the trees, and even when you think of non-sentient things like clouds and mountains, we don't need to worry about whether they have sentience or not particularly. They have an intelligence in that they function in their way. Clouds function in a cloud-like way. Mountains function in a mountain-like way. And they're supporting the sentient life. Without them, we wouldn't have the sentient life. So we don't really even need to create a particular boundary between sentience and non-sentience. They're all supporting each other. And they do have their own intelligence. Water works the way water works. Rocks erode the way rocks erode. Lava flows the way lava flows. They don't get mixed up about that. It's a kind of sentience in its own way. It's a kind of sentience. Yes, so that's the fourth. Margaret. You have to unmute.
Yep.
Yep.
It reminds that second approach reminds me of the yoga practice where when you breathe in, you're aware of the coolness of the air and it warms in your lungs. And when you breathe out, it's much warmer.
Ooh, that's very nice.
And it doesn't work so well on hot days. But in winter, it really is a very strong sensation of the coolness coming in, and then the giving would be the warmth as
Yes.
it comes out.
Yes. And it still should sort of work on warm days in that, aren't we supposed to always be cooler? I mean, aren't we meant to be warmer than the air around us? Isn't that the problem with people getting overheated? Because
Yes,
you need the outside to be cooler than you.
yes.
And that's why people get heat
Well,
stroke
they die.
and they die. That's right. So probably mostly we find a way to get ourselves into spaces where our lungs are warmer than the air that's coming in. That's really nice. Thank you. All right. Well, let's finish with our chanting and some bows. I'll just